When the shooting stopped in the 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, you'd be forgiven for thinking the war was over. But you'd be wrong. A totally new kind of war was just kicking off. One fought not with missiles and tanks, but with press releases, tweets, and soundbites. This is the story of the high-stakes geopolitical battle for credit, a war over who really brought peace to South Asia. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at this new kind of war, a war over peace. Then we'll dive into the competing claims from the big global players. After that, we'll get into India's really tricky position and the pressure it's under. We'll also unpack this idea of a narrative gap and why it's so dangerous. And finally, we'll look ahead to 2026 and what this all means for the future.
All right, let's set the scene. As soon as India's military campaign, Operation Sindoor, was officially paused, the battlefield just shifted. It moved from the physical border right onto the global stage. And this time, it wasn't about capturing territory. No, this was all about capturing influence.
And this is the absolute key to understanding what happened next. The fight to control the story of why the fighting stopped became just as intense, if not more so, than the military operation itself. All of a sudden, every major power was scrambling to be seen as the hero, the one indispensable peacemaker who saved the day. So, who were the main characters in this credit war? Well, it really boiled down to two global giants, the United States and China. Both of them stepped up to the microphone, each with a completely different and totally conflicting story about how they brokered the ceasefire. And you can just see how different their playbooks were. On one side, you've got Beijing trying to look like this benevolent diplomat, talking about building lasting peace. And on the other side, you have Donald Trump's America basically saying, nope, we did it with raw economic muscle. Their claim was that they threatened both sides with huge trade sanctions and forced them to stop. And let me tell you, the Trump administration was not shy about its version of events. In fact, President Trump reportedly pushed this narrative more than 60, maybe even 70 times. It's a classic PR move, right? If you just say something enough times, it starts to feel true, no matter what the facts on the ground actually are. But here's where it gets really interesting. While China's story sounds all diplomatic and peaceful, a lot of analysts are pointing out that Beijing is basically using a page from Trump's own playbook. They're projecting this image of a president of peace, while at the same time, they're actively fueling other conflicts. It's this bizarre, contradictory strategy, and it's kind of fascinating to watch. And this is the smoking gun. This is where China's whole peacemaker story just completely falls apart. Because while they were publicly talking about peace, Indian forces on the ground found direct evidence of their involvement. Failed Chinese-made PL-15 missiles that had been fired by Pakistan. So the very country claiming credit for the peace was also arming one side of the conflict. So you have to wonder, how was all of this playing out back in New Delhi? Well, as you can probably guess, having two of the world's biggest superpowers basically claim they ordered you to stop your own military operation, that does not go over well. India was suddenly in a really, really tough spot, both globally and at home. Officially, India's stance was crystal clear, at least to its own people. Prime Minister Modi went before Parliament and said it plainly. No foreign leader forced India to stop. He insisted that India chose to pause the operation on its own terms after meeting its goals. It was a powerful declaration of what we call strategic autonomy.
But saying it in Parliament is one thing. The problem was that message wasn't really breaking through on the global stage. And back home, the opposition pounced, arguing that by letting these claims from the US and China go unchallenged, India's sovereignty was basically being laughed at. The narrative was spinning out of control.
This domestic heat created a really clear demand. People started saying, hey, where's the Ministry of External Affairs? They need to get out there. There was a growing call for a really tough, unambiguous global message to shut down these foreign claims and just set the record straight once and for all. And this really gets to the core of the whole issue. While India was being clear at home, its relative silence on the world stage created this vacuum, a dangerous narrative gap that its rivals, China and the US, were more than happy to jump in and fill with their own stories.
So the big question is, why? Why be so quiet? Why let other countries define your actions for you? Well, the answer seems to come down to a very difficult and very risky strategic calculation.
It seems the main reason was all about the economy. Think about it. Publicly calling out a massive trading partner like the United States, especially when its leader is making such a forceful claim, could put really important trade deals at risk. It's that classic tough choice in geopolitics.
Do you defend your national pride or do you protect your economic interests?
This whole episode just perfectly illustrates a fundamental truth of our times, and it's captured in this quote. If you don't define your own actions, if you don't tell your own story, the world will happily do it for you. And in the information age, believe me, the story can become way more powerful than the actual facts on the ground.
So what's the lesson here? How does a country like India avoid getting caught in this kind of narrative trap again? Well, the analysis suggests the answer isn't just about hiring a better PR firm. Real geopolitical strength, the kind that lets you actually control your own story, is built on a foundation of domestic power, especially in technology and the economy. And the proposed path forward is a really clear two-step strategy. First, you've got to lead in technology. That means setting up things like a national AI research institution. And second, you have to empower your people. That means pushing young people to get skilled up in crucial areas like data science and generative AI. The core idea is simple. A nation that's an innovator is a nation that has the power to write its own story. So the conclusion from all of this is pretty stark. What happened after the ceasefire was a massive wake-up call. It proved that simply winning on the battlefield just isn't enough anymore. To be a truly sovereign, powerful nation in the 21st century, you have to win the diplomatic and, maybe most importantly, the information war too. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. In this modern era where information moves at the speed of light and conflicts are so complex, what does it even mean to win a war anymore? I mean, if you achieve all your military goals, but you completely lose control of the story, have you really won it all?